Hey, welcome back to Wine and Weeds. It's been a couple of weeks since we've had an episode, but we are still whining and weeding. And sometimes we're whining with an H, but that depends on the weather or the bugs. Anyway, very excited to let you know that today we actually have a guest star weeder. So Laura from How's It Growing is busy building a greenhouse, and I thought I would just invite a mutual friend of ours to come in and share what she's drinking and what she's weeding in her New Jersey garden. So first of all, I'll just kick off with what I'm whining and weeding. I went straight to wine today. You guys, I'm just keeping it super simple. Some days you just gotta go for what gets in the glass quick. And today that's just back to my favorite New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. I really like the Sauvignon Blancs from New Zealand. It's because I spent a year basically drinking them down there, and you know, I just think that I like them. They're crisp, but they're a little grape. I like if they have a little grapefruit in them. They're very refreshing, and it's one of my easy go-to summer drinks. So I've started without you guys today, and I already have poured my wine because I thought I'd get straight into my weeds. Then we can get over to Yuliya from Y Garden, who is a fabulous garden designer who is going to share one of the weeds that's bugging her. So here we go. So I bet many of you recognize this weed today. If you look closely, you will see this is Woodland Violet, or we call it wild violet around here. And this is another plant that certainly was introduced as a ground cover, and it's just kind of gone wild. In fact, I will tell you that large patches of this Woodland Violet in some areas can really be quite beautiful as long as they are contained. It's when they sort of sporadically pop up throughout your garden that they become problematic, because they can really take over. And you might have seen they're not easy to dig up. So they have these little hairy roots, which aren't so, see if you can see that. They've got these little hairy roots, but they also have this sort of tuberous root. And it's very hard to get that whole thing when you dig it up. Honestly, I often don't get it all. So like many plants that I consider to be a weed, there are a lot of benefits to this plant. The leaves are edible, the flowers are edible. In fact, they are a very important food source for an entire category of butterflies called fritillaries. So there's reasons to grow these, which is why my approach on these is I just remove them from the places where they're bothering me in the garden. Farther back in the garden, they can stay there. And they can do their thing back there. So I don't consider this, you know, on my weed scale. Let's put this at a 3, just because I find it to be a little bit obnoxious. But there are benefits to this plant and reasons to not remove it entirely from your garden. And again, I do think there's value to considering this as a ground cover in a very contained, shady area, because it's one thing that will grow there. I did just want to show you at least one look-alike for it. So you can see that there's a very heart-shaped leaf on the violet, and they grow in these little clusters. This is a leaf that looks very much like it, but this is in every way, shape, and form a weed. And we're going to get to this weed in a future episode, but it requires a lot of talk and a very strong drink. This is creeping bellflower, which is maybe the second worst weed I have on my property right now. Anyway, violet, you might consider it a plant. I kind of consider it a weed because I do remove it, but it's not something that keeps me up at night, unlike this guy. All right, let's go see what Yuliya is weeding in her garden, and more importantly, what she's drinking.
Hi guys, hi Erin. Thank you so much for having me for Wine and Weeds on your channel. Now, if you don't know me, my name is Yuliya and I live in northern New Jersey and I garden in zone 6. But I think they're going to move us closer to zone 7 because our weather is getting warmer. Like for example, today it's almost 100 degrees and uber humid, or as I call it, icky sticky. So for my drink today, I am drinking sangria. And I don't normally drink sangria every day. I prefer it at a party. But what I have been doing lately is just getting all of the fruit that I would not be eating over the week, and the fruit that kind of looks bruised or a little bit soft or something that I would not eat raw, I just chop it up and I put it in the pitcher. I do like to use oranges and lemons and squeeze it in the pitcher. And what I do, I add some Prosecco. I'm a big Prosecco drinker because it's a lighter alcoholic drink. But my husband likes white wine, so I mix a little bit of white wine in it, and I do like Sauvignon Blancs, and he does as well. And it makes it for a very balanced alcoholic beverage. Now, I place the entire mixture in the refrigerator for about half an hour, so the fruit juices sort of go into the beverage and the alcohol goes into the fruit. And when you're done with your drink, you can eat the fruit and it's actually delicious. And I kind of consider it my serving of fruit for the day. So this is my drink. Cheers. And as for my weed for the day, my dog is playing with the ball. Pardon the noise. And the cicadas too. We got tons of cicadas right now. Anyway, for the weed, let me take you to where I have it. It's actually a very interesting plant. Now this weed lives everywhere in my garden, but it especially likes my sidewalk garden. And because my gardens are so wild looking, it's kind of hard to tell what's a weed and what's not. So for example, you see this beautiful Joe Pye weed right there. Weed, Joe Pye weed. This weed I'm about to show you is also in Joe Pye weed family, or Eupatorium. This is Eupatorium rugosum, or snake root. And my definition of weed is basically a plant that grows somewhere I don't want it. So interesting thing about this weed or snake root or Eupatorium rugosum, I'm just going to start pulling it as I'm talking about it, is it is a native plant. It is actually quite pretty, and it was the cause of milk sickness in settlers. So what milk sickness is when livestock like cows or goats would eat this plant here. This plant has a particular toxin that when it human metabolizes it, person can die, and people did die from it, and for a long time nobody could figure out why. And then one scientist did an experiment and kind of found the compound that was responsible for this particular milk sickness. Here it is, another one. So these plants can grow quite tall. I have some that are about 4 feet tall. Right here in the shade, they're not as big, but they like to hide with my other plants because it's kind of hard to tell. It especially grows around my other Eupatoriums. So I like to leave some of them for a late pollinators, because this plant actually blooms with beautiful white flowers in October where not a lot of things are blooming. So I leave a few right there. These are a little bit taller right here, just for those pollinators. But I like those plants to be away from sidewalks or away from somewhere where a person or an animal can get to it. Here, I missed one right here. There's a big one. So there is my interesting weed of the day, snake root. So this plant does have an interesting story. On one hand, it's a beautiful native plant that supports pollinators when not a lot of other things are blooming in the garden. But on the other hand, this is toxic and it can't kill an herbivore or a human through their milk. So I do have a love-hate relationship with this weed. I do leave some patches of snake root in my garden so the pollinators can enjoy it all the way through October, but I remove it everywhere else where people or animals have access to it. Now, there's one thing about this plant that I found interesting, that deer tend to avoid it. I think because deer and snakeroot co-evolved in Northern America, deer do not eat this plant. And what I found, wherever I have it, deer avoid eating the plants in the entire area. So that could go into our favor. Anyway, I hope you guys learned something new today. And thank you so much, Erin, again, for having me over. This was so much fun, and I'll hope to see you soon.
Well, while Yuliya was busy showing us that beautiful sangria, we had an accident here. I kicked my wine glass over and now it's empty. So it's time to wrap up this episode of Wine and Weeds. I hope you guys enjoyed it. You guys, I'm going to put links down below to all the other episodes we've done, because we might have covered a weed that you're interested in, and we might have made a drink you're interested in. I particularly recommend, by the way, my lime daiquiri that I made a couple episodes ago. All right, you guys have a great day in your garden. Let me know what weed is driving you nuts this week. Go give Yuliya some love on her channel. And these dogs are going crazy below me, so have a great day in your garden.